what are the basic patterns of society that we find in most of the texts written during this particular time period. Or whenever we try to identify the society being portrayed in the plays, fundamentally we find that somehow one particular topic that is considered to be important in each and every kind of texts. The first one is the importance of the society that have been presented. The second one is the plot construction. That means how the plot has been circulated or plot has been incorporated. The third one is obviously the art of characterization or the implications of major characters who are present within this particular text. The pattern of society that I am discussing. So for example, whenever we think in terms of the society, there we can find the class differentiation. And as it is a matter with the typical Indian society, which is markedly different from the society of the West or society from the West, we can find that there is caste-based differentiation, number one. And number two, it is gendered society, number two. That is gender-oriented differences. You can note the points actually, because you have to develop your answers on the basis of these. I repeat, the first one is the differentiation of the society on the basis of caste. Number two, differentiation on the basis of gender. Number three, differentiation on the basis of monetary positions. And number four, differentiation on the basis of professions. So whenever we read the texts of this particular time period, whether we consider the society on the basis of its presentation, we find that different kinds of orientations have been incorporated by the major authors, major writers of this particular age. But along with that, we can find that whenever such a kind of differentiation is being made, we have to focus on the fundamental basics of the text itself. I have also mentioned in my previous classes that the primary focus of this particular text, this is Mrichchhakatika, is based on a kind of love theme, a kind of love affair that is going on between Charudatta and Basanta Sena. But at the same time, you have to keep it in mind that Basanta Sena is a character who is no longer to be considered as coming from the upper strata of society, or may be considered to be a person who is coming from the upper section of the society or upper class. In spite of having money, in a modern scenario, in the typical concept of West, we find that whenever a person has got money, he has to be treated as someone belonging to the upper section of the society. But here also you will find that somehow that particular kind of differentiation is being made on the basis of profession too. That means, what does the person actually do? Say for example, if we think in terms of Charudatta, then you will find that Charudatta doesn't have such amount of money that he previously had. But now at the present scenario, now at the present condition, we find that Charudatta is to some extent suffering from a particular kind of a financial crisis. Now this particular financial crisis, to be specific, is due to a certain kind of a loss in his profession, loss in his trades and commerce or something like that. But in spite of that particular loss, in spite of the scarcity, in spite of the lack that he was suffering from regarding money and property and something like that, we can find from the beginning to the end, there is a continuous form of references that actually deals with Charudatta's, it it is nothing but honor and glory that he is actually facing. So when it is a matter with Charudatta's temperament, when it is the matter with Charudatta's thought processes, when it is the matter with Charudatta's, the fundamental basics that he is doing with, in each and every perspective, as you can see, from the very beginning to the end, from the very first act to the last act, you will find that at the time, even when Charudatta was on the verge of death, when the executioners are operational, at that very moment also, you will find certainly that they are actually thinking in terms of saving Charudatta rather than killing Charudatta. Why? Just because of the particular fact that he is considered to be an honorable Brahmin. Now, fundamentally, as I have already mentioned, that the particular kind of a society that have been portrayed within this particular text, that is Mrichchhakatika, we find that Charudatta belongs to the Brahmin caste. And fundamentally, the caste-based differentiation, that was my first point of this particular discussion. Here also you will find that Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra, these are the four differentiating factors, differentiating marks of the typical Hindu society that have been portrayed in Ujjaini at the time. Now, what happens to be a truth, that in the later period too, in the writing of you see that Karnad, that is in Karnad's writing, like Hayavadana, which is in your second year, okay, the second semester actually. So there also you will find that particular kind of differentiation that is called Varnashrama. Okay, that means a kind of differentiation on the basis of profession, and at the same time on the basis of the caste. It was also prevalent within that particular country of Ujjaini. And that's why you will find that Charudatta, who is actually belonging to the Brahmin, and if you consider the etymology of the term Brahmin, that means you will find that Brahmin is a person, okay, Brahmin is a caste that is generally being associated with Brahmana. That means the person who does have the knowledge of the concept of Brahma. So it doesn't mean anything to any hierarchical, okay, the hierarchy is always there, but any particular, that you are belonging to the son of a Brahmin, therefore you are a Brahmin. The particular caste and creed, the particular patterning that we find today, it was not present during that time. In the ancient Aryan civilization, you will find certainly that Brahmin was a particular kind of a post to some extent. It was a culture. It was a concept and construct. Anybody, any person who does have the capability of being a Brahmin can be a Brahmin at the time, or could be a Brahmin at the time, just because of the particular fact that you have the intellect, you have the, you have the temperament, you have such a kind of knowledge within. That is the sole reason why you can become a Brahmin, to be specific. Now, what happens, that from that very angle, from that very perspective, we find that Brahmin, this very term, actually being considered as something important in the perspective of the society, just because the person who belongs to the Brahmin category, a person who belongs to that particular culture, a person who belongs to that particular orientation of life, he does have more knowledge than other personalities. And that's why a particular form of honor, a particular form of respect is always being provided with a Brahmin. But in the later period, we find that the orientation of this particular differentiation was certainly got changed. Because now in the present scenario, we find that any person who is belonging to the house of Brahmins is generally being considered Brahmin. So ultimately, the basic temperament has got changed. Whenever we have thought about the Varnashrama that I have mentioned just now, that is, বর্ণের উপর ডিপেন্ড করে যে ডিফারেন্সিয়েশনটা, সেই দিক থেকে আমরা কি দেখছি, the first creed was given to the Brahmins, the second one the Kshatriyas, that means the persons who actually protected our kingdom, okay, and any king, any ruler, they actually belonging to that particular category who does have more prowess than wisdom. But ultimately you will find then there come the Vaishyas, that means Babshayi jara mainly, and then comes the Shudra. So whenever it is the matter with Shudra, you will find that Shudra actually belongs to any particular section of the society who is belonging to the working class in general. Now, what happens, at the very beginning, at the very onset of this particular text, we have been completely being informed that that ultimately Charudatta belongs to a particular culture. Charudatta belongs to a particular sect who is considered to be a Brahmin. Now, when it is a matter with a Brahmin, then ultimately you will find that somehow Charudatta does have such kind of potentiality within. Okay, and in the next perspective, in the next form, you will find certainly that Palaka, okay, that means the king here, as we can find in this particular text, that two persons have been incorporated. One is Palaka and second one is Shakara, that means the relative of Palaka. Structurally, you will find that these are the two personalities who are coming from the Kshatriya class, right? That means they are belonging to the second category. But in spite of belonging to the second category of this particular Varna, sorry, you will find that Shakara and Palaka, they are not being treated with much more respect. Okay, whereas you will find that Shakara, the Sanasthanak, and obviously Palaka, who is the ruler of this particular kingdom, they are treated with less respect than the other personalities of this particular creed or culture. So why such a kind of temperament, why such a kind of orientation has been provided to this particular text? The question certainly arises within our mind. That ultimately we have already traced the basic reason why the persons who are belonging to the particular culture, the particular group of the kings and rulers, why they are treated in a different way. The fundamental basic reason, the fundamental, the basis of this particular ideological difference actually based on the particular fact that somehow the person who actually wrote this particular text, that is Mrichchhakatika, he is coming from the lower section. As I mentioned, that Sudraka, who is the Avira king at the time, and ultimately he was one among the cowherds. And so far as the matters with the cowherds are concerned, we find the cowherds are not belonging to the group of the, to some extent, though he was a king, obviously, but ultimately you will find the cowherds are actually belonging to the lower section of the society. To be specific, these are the Shudras. Now, generally, what you can trace, what we can identify here in this particular text, that, Sudraka has actually propounded this very differentiation, propounded this particular ideological orientations and sociological discourses in a better way, okay, than any other person that actually wrote his plays during this particular time period. Why I am trying to suggest these? Because you will find in the presentation of the character, the most important character probably in Mrichchhakatika, as we have found, it is Vasanta. And fundamentally, as we find in most of the texts written during this particular time period, as I mentioned earlier, that the heroines are coming from the upper strata of society. Either she belongs to the Kshatriyas, or she belongs to, who does have some affinity, some association with the gods and the goddesses, or maybe some kinnars and kinnaries and gandharvas and something like that. You will find some either in the form of the sages. That means you see that there are ample references of the sages there in the texts like Shakuntala and something like that. Okay, so the sages are there, some munis are there, and there are some persons who are directly belonging to the gods and goddesses. Okay, like Mahabharata, you will find that there are ample references of the characters who are directly or indirectly related to the gods and goddesses. And there are also other characters who does have the essential or more than human attributes. But in this particular case, where we are treating Vasanta Sena in a different way, because Vasanta Sena is actually belonging to not the upper strata of society, not even the middle strata of society. Rather, Vasanta Sena, in spite of having such kind of enormous wealth as she has, as we can find. It has been mentioned when Maitreya actually enters Vasanta Sena's house, as we have already found, that when Maitreya actually enters Vasanta Sena's house in the particular locale, in the particular country or city, then we have found that somehow Vasanta Sena had an enormous amount of treasure, enormous amount of money within. But ultimately, in spite, what I'm trying to suggest here, what I'm trying to focus here, that in spite of having such amount of money, in spite of having such amount of treasure with her, Vasanta Sena is not being treated as one among the upper section of the society. Again, in spite of not having any portions of wealth, okay, that have been associated with Charudatta, you will find certainly that Charudatta is not being treated as a bad person, or maybe something, the person who must not be honored. Okay, in the present connotation, in the present society, that means where we are living at this moment, we're living, we find that somehow the person who doesn't have the enormous amount of money, the person who doesn't have the money, they are not being treated with much more honor and respect, because the matter of respect, the matter of honor is always vested on the basis of money. So money actually matters in case of the temperament of the persons who are actually treating the persons in a different way. But the particular form of society that is being presented here in this particular text, that is Mrichchhakatika, you will find that the money doesn't matter actually. Okay, money obviously matters, but ultimately you will find, so far as the matter with respect is concerned, the matter with honor is concerned, we cannot find that money becomes a particular measure of the amount, or it cannot, it cannot relate with the patterns of honor and respect to be specific. That's why you will find that in spite of not having any particular amount of money, in spite of not having any particular amount of wealth, Charudatta is being respected and honored by all. But at the same time, you will find that Vasanta Sena, who does have enormous wealth and enormous money and the treasure, but she has been treated as a prostitute. She has been treated as a gonika. She has been treated as to some extent, you see, Nagarbodhu. Okay, to be specific, that means the person who is being devoted to each and all. But fundamentally, the temperament of the Nagarbodhu, the temperament of the wench or prostitute, or maybe that I have already mentioned, it's the courtesan. So the temperament is altogether different. The way Vasanta Sena has been treated, the way Vasanta Sena is behaving in this particular text, it is somehow quite different from the other segmentations of or other presentation of the paramour, or other presentations of the courtesans, or maybe the prostitutes in general. So I will discuss that later when I will discuss about Vasanta Sena, her temperament, her standpoint, her affair, her feeling, her condition. So these will be discussed later while I was going with the particular topic, then I will consider them. But as my present topic, as I was discussing on the presentation of the society that we can find or we can trace in this particular text, here you will find obviously the Vasanta Sena is a character. Vasanta Sena is an important character who is actually representing, who is actually focusing on the different orientations of people.